So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we are taking out a new model, or a new bike. It's called the Blueshark R1. Let's start at the beginning. So Blueshark is the name of the bike. Sharkgulf Technologies is the company. They are Chinese, out of Shanghai, and they haven't been around too long. 2019 was when they actually started. The R1 is their first bike. It's won a Good Design Award in 2020. There are actually a few bikes now that are coming out looking a bit like this. So if you know of people like Gogoro, and there are quite a few other Chinese brands, this sort of front end that we'll show you on the static review is becoming quite common, possibly because they copy each other's designs, I suppose. But this is comes in four models itself. There's a 28 mile an hour one, L1E license, and this 50 mile an hour one, which is an L3E license. And then there's two versions within that. We're calling this the premium. It doesn't say that on the website, but it does talk about the other one being the light version, LITE. So we thought that we'll call this the premium version, and hopefully that'll become apparent. So in the UK you'll find these under Keyway's brand. Keyway are a Chinese manufacturer, but this is a company in its own right, Sharkgulf. Okay. Where to put it amongst all the others? The closest ones to this are probably the Sunra Robo-S or the NQiGTS standard range, not necessarily the extended range. And range is something that we'll come on to. I guess in theory you could compare it to maybe a Horwin EK3, possibly even an NIU Evo for some of the aspects of it, but the closest ones are the other two, Sunra Robo-S and the NQiGTS standard range. So it's 1.88 meters long, 1 centimeter longer than an NQiGTS, so pretty much the same. In terms of wheel size, it is 12-inch wheels, which would make it equal to the Robo, whereas the NQiGTS is 14-inch wheels. But again, pretty much all around the same sort of size and weight. This is 90 kilos without the two 11-kilo batteries. Okay, so 112 kilos with both batteries loaded. The NQiGTS is a little bit more, and the Sunra is about the same. Okay, so there or thereabouts. In terms of power, it's 5 kilowatts. So again, pretty similar to an NQiGTS. The difference being, though, that this is it's not hub-mounted motor. It's still brushless, but it's hung on the outside of the wheel, at the rear, if you like. You probably can't hear it, but there is a bit of a noise, tiny little bit. It's not going to warn anyone that you're coming or what have you, but it isn't totally silent. It's almost quite soothing. Anyway, so yeah, 5 kilowatts externally mounted. I think that means, although I didn't look, dealing with the rear tyre would be easier on this bike, because I don't think you have to muck about with the cable, you just detach the wheel from the motor. I'd have to check that for the static review. One of the differences between the three that I'm talking about is the voltage. So this one is only 48 volts, which sort of in this day and age is a little bit surprising. The NQiGTS is 60 and the Sunra is 72. What that typically means is acceleration. Okay, normally you get better acceleration with the higher the voltage. We'll do a 0 to top in a little while, and maybe you can compare. Just while it's obvious, it does make a bit of a noise when you're doing the indicators. Okay, what's going on the dashboard we'll come to. Okay, so not silent indicators, unlike the Robo. Obviously the NQiGTS does have that bing bong. We'll go around the dash a bit later, because this is where the bike comes into its own, really. Okay, so as you can see, I'm in mode 1. It's just doing 25 miles an hour. So again, nothing too surprising about that. What you do notice on the dashboard is it's actually quite informative, to say the least, quite large and quite colourful. But one of the things that it's pointing at you down here is your actual consumption of energy in watts. Okay, so at the moment, accelerating or cruising along at 24, we're using about a kilowatt. So sort of about the power of a small kettle to move, what, 190 kilos with me on it. So it sort of shows how efficient, or what you can actually do if you use energy well. Okay, so for less than the power to boil a pint of water, you can move one of these things with me on it at 28 miles an hour. Okay, so I have no qualms about taking up our Nightingale Lane, but other than this. Okay. Okay, so 5 kilowatts, so it shouldn't have any trouble getting up this hill. This is in mode 1 as well. Okay, so this is a 1 in 7, I think, if we put it into mode 2, so hasn't lost any power. Okay, I wasn't really expecting anything else. Richmond Hill. Okay, so as we're talking about changing modes, this one actually has 6. Right, so 1, 2, 3, like you normally expect. So obviously mode 1 was giving me 24. Top will give you about 50. So mode 2 is, we'll find out a little bit, it'll probably give you about, I don't know, 40, something like that. But then it's got reverse. Not necessarily needed, but one of the things that this bike does is it has cameras, which you might have caught when I indicated left. It's got front and rear cameras on it. So not only do the cameras, you can use the cameras for recording, like you could technically do on a Super Socko CUX, which still has that camera option for £175. This comes with 2 built in, a front and a rear one. So the front one is used mainly for recording, and this is actually being recorded on the bike, so I can show you that on the static review. But it's also got a rear one. So the rear one is used with one of the modes, which is reverse. So when you go into reverse, you'll see on the dashboard what's behind you. What you'll also see on the dashboard is when you indicate left or right, because this is where this bike starts to sort of differentiate itself even from NIU with all of the smart bits that even the ill-fated NQiGT Evo has. It's sort of surpassed all of that. But we'll come on to that as well. So, yeah, so 1, 2, 3 forward, reverse, and then something called EPM. And EPM is like a crawl forward mode. Okay, so you know, sometimes when you get off a bike and you need to push it up a driveway or something like that, and you think, oh, if I could just turn it on, use the throttle, but then of course you run the risk, and people have done it, where they forget, twist the throttle, full whack, and off it goes. This EPM mode, which you get by holding the ready button until it goes into EPM, you see it's now gone to EPM, that means it will just crawl along, okay? Couple of miles an hour, just to give you that assistance without you having to actually be worried that you're going to, you know, accidentally twist it and off it goes to 50 miles an hour. Okay, so just some of the stuff about the dash. So you see it's got GPS, it's connected to the mobile phone. This is showing me my consumption. I can change the dashboard layout. Here's my general information about my journey. I've got a map. That is not navigation, but it is a map showing you where you are. Okay. Again, we'll come back to this in much more detail on the static review, because most of the time you're talking about this bike, it is about the stuff that it can do, other than riding it. Okay, so yeah, the cameras. Oh, and then the last mode is turbo. So interestingly, Silence SO1 Plus has got this sort of turbo boost mode where you press the button and you get just an extra shot of energy for you to overtake. So in the Silence SO1's case, SO1 Plus's case, it gets you from 60 to 68 miles an hour. It lasts for 30 seconds and then you can't use it again for 2 minutes. Okay, obviously there's a bit of a hit on the battery when doing that. So this has got a turbo mode here. Okay, you see now it's gone into turbo mode. As to the difference it actually makes, somewhat skeptical, but we will try it when we come to do the 0 to top, just to see if it does make a lot of difference. Okay, but so that's 1, 2, 3 forward, EPM, reverse, and turbo. Okay, so 6 modes that you've got there. One of the other things that you notice down here is this little blue sort of halo around the rider. That is talking about the sensors that are on the bike. Okay, so as you see, indicating, see now I have a rear sensor on, showing me what's behind, using the rear camera. Okay, so that, although this might just have proven, shouldn't distract you from riding the bike, it does give you a rear view mirror, and it's built into the bike. Okay, and if I go left, it's going to show me again. All right, so it's showing you sort of what's going on. There is a system within the menus, which is, I think it's called ADAS, something like that. Again, I can show you that on the static review, but it's all about, do you want the reversing cameras on? Do you want the side stand detection on? Because obviously it can detect whether the side stand. I mean, that's not particularly a big deal because lots of bikes do that. But you can enable and disable that. I'm not too sure why you would disable it. I think it would be a pretty good feature anyway. So let's just do this just to see how fast it goes in second. So 24 in 1, 38 in second. Okay, so that's that. And then obviously top will be 50 or thereabouts. Okay, so as you can see, cruising along, the map is telling me where I am. The other gauge is telling me on the right hand side other sorts of information, like I'm now using 2 kilowatts to go along, or 1.9 kilowatts to go along at 38 miles an hour. Okay, you've got consumption of both the batteries, etc., etc. So while we're on the batteries, if there's one thing you might say about this bike is the fact that it's 48 volt. In the days where, you know, 72 volt is common, 60 volt is very common, to bring out a bike that's got 48 volts rather than 60 just seems a little bit, I guess, outdated, I suppose. But it doesn't really seem to affect. I mean, I've ridden like the Segway, and that's the new Segway, the 110 Segway, and that's 48 volt, and that wouldn't have got up the hill that I just rode up. Well, in fact, it didn't. I don't know if you saw the review of that one. It was left lacking, basically. That Segway with 48 volt. It was only 1500 watts, but even so, it barely made it. I guess if you're tying this to 5 kilowatts, the fact that it's 48 volt is sort of dealt with by just having more power. But of course, the other thing that having 48 volt does is it affects your total kilowatt hours in terms of capacity of the batteries. Okay, so this has got 2 batteries in it. They're pretty cool in terms of no connectors. The connectors are at the bottom. So you literally just drop them in. You don't have to faff about with leads and all that. You just literally drop them in, and the it just connects up, and then they'll start showing up here. But the total kilowatt hour capacity of both batteries together is 2.8 kilowatt hours. Okay, so 2.8 kilowatts is basically the same as one 72 volt 40 amp hour battery in a Horwin EK1 or 3. Okay, so it's also less by about 10% than the NQiGTS standard range. That's 3.1 kilowatts. It's about the same as the 2 Sunra batteries, but if they just made it 60 volt, then they would have had more capacity than both of those, and hence the potential for more range. Okay, so it's not a big thing, it's just a little bit surprising that they picked 48 volt, I suppose. Okay, but as I said, at the end of the day, it's only 10% less than an NQiGTS standard range, and the same as the Sunra Robo. But the Robo is 3 kilowatts, whereas this is 5. Okay, so what it probably means is it will equal out to probably a little bit less than a Robo, and about the same, I would say, as an NQiGTS. And the reason I say that is because even though the GTS has got a greater capacity in batteries, it's got a this has got a more powerful motor. Okay, so the net is, it's probably as usual NIU if you want range, and then between this and the Robo, it's probably about the same. Okay. All right. One of the other interesting things about this bike is that it does come with the ability to charge both off the bike together. So that isn't always the case. Robo, you'd have to buy a second charger. Horwin, you'd have to buy a second charger. NIU, you can do it. Okay. Super Socko don't even do this. So it is cleverly thought out. There's, as we'll show you on the static review, it is sort of like 2 little cradles that you just rest the batteries into, and then you get a splitter from the main charger, and they go into the bottom of the bases of these cradles. Okay. One of the other interesting things about that sort of area is actually the battery compartment itself. So even though it's got 2 batteries under there, there is still space for a open face helmet. Okay, so that is unique as far as the ones we do. There's no other bike that gets 2 batteries and a helmet under the seat. Okay, so if that's something that you want to think about, bearing in mind that I have yet to see a rack for this bike, you could put an open face helmet under the seat, or while you're riding, take a chain and padlock and all that under the seat, and then swap when you get to your destination, and there you go. Okay. So just some other sort of technicalities. As I said, running on 12-inch wheels. They are. It does have CBS, combined braking, and it does have obviously discs front and back. Okay. Cosmetically, I mean, you know, it's whether you like it or not. It's a little bit different, I suppose, to others that are around at the moment. Some people like that. What I will say, as we're talking about sort of the body and bodywork, is these mirrors are very good. They're high and they stick out enough. I don't know if you've ever ridden something like a Horwin bike, but most of the time on a Horwin, I'm looking at my shoulders. They don't stick out far enough. NIUs aren't that much better, but these are, you know, I can easily see what's going on behind me, especially if I do it in combination with the camera. Right, so well done them. In terms of colours, interestingly, Blueshark do a blue, but that isn't being brought in over here by Kiwi. So it is just white and black, okay, and some graphics on it that are typically in blue, okay. So range, as I said, it says, well, it said 55, I think, when we left. We're now down to 48. You know, we haven't been going the fastest, but we will go up and down the A316 a little bit and see what that does. It's done nearly 20%, and it's taken, let's say, 7 miles. It's obviously not going to do... no, it should do 5 times that. Charging time is 3.5 hours for those 2 batteries, which is good. It's up there with sort of the best of them, especially as you don't have to worry about swapping over a lead or whatever if you charge them off the bike. You can obviously charge them under the bike. On the bike, there's a little slot for the lead to go into under the seat. The other thing about it is that there's, because of all the sort of clever stuff, there is an app, and this is, again, just like an NIU app or a Super Socko app. You can update software on the bike, you can start the bike, stop the bike, locate the bike, open the bike's seat, play music through the bike. So if you look down there, there are speakers, and there is actually, on the right hand side here, there is a play button. So if my phone was connected, I could actually play my music through the external speaker of the bike. Not too sure why you might do that if you're whizzing along, but anyway, it's there. You can also obviously connect to your phone, things like that. It also has fingerprint starting. So this is essentially what Sunra do. Okay, so Sunra have that ability for you to register your fingerprints and start the bike. Okay, it does work in sort of combination to the proximity of the fob, from what I can tell. So in other words, the fob has to be a fair distance away before the fingerprint activation works, which I'll try and clarify, but it seemed to me that if I had the fob nearby, I could just start the bike with any finger. But if the fingerprint reader, if the fob was not near the bike, then I have to use my specifically registered finger, which I guess is a little bit unusual, but anyway. Anyway, so as you can see, cruising along now, 42, consuming 3.7 kilowatts of power as we're going along. No real issues here, now doing 48, its top speed is 50, so seems to be doing just fine. You see I've got a fair amount of space, you know, I'm 1.80 m, 6'1", and there is a ridge in this seat, so I do have to sit where it tells me, and no issues over knees at all. So that's obviously good. And what we're going to do now is just do our 0 to 50 on a section of 50 A316 here, just to see if the turbo mode does actually do what it says it should do. Okay, so we'll be back in a second and talk a bit more about the dash, and then see how it gets on. Okay. Okay, so we're stopped, and I thought I'd show you a bit more about the dash as I'm here. So obviously we're indicating, so we've got the rear view mirror, so rear view. So you can see cars are whizzing up behind me. Okay, that's one of the things. See, the dashboard is 10 inches. It's what, 25 and a bit centimeters wide. You've got your mapping system here. In some respects, it's a bit like an NIU. It will show you a map. I don't know if you've seen it on the NIU. They have this on the app on the phone. They talk about, oh, let's go, and there's a mapping system there. All that is doing is showing you a map on the phone. It is not actually navigation. It's using the phone to do the navigation. So you'd still use your phone for navigation, but this just gives you an indication of where you are. Okay. In the menu system, you can download maps for all over the place. You connect it to Wi-Fi. This will be a non-password protected Wi-Fi. Pick your country, and you can download the map, and it will show you where you are in that particular country. Okay, so offline maps, which is interesting in itself. As I said here, you've got the ability to play music through the speakers. So they're the speakers there. While we're looking down, so you've got your bag hook, you've got more than enough space for your feet. Okay. Underneath there is the key slot, which isn't used to start the bike, but is used to open the seat if you don't have the batteries in the bike, or your fob's gone flat, whatever. Also a USB port. Okay. Here you've got your fingerprint. So you register your fingerprint. I can show you that in a second. And then here was your power consumption, as I mentioned before. Here you can choose your light or dark mode. So the way you do that is most of it's done through these 3 or 4 buttons here. So you can just change and go to dark mode, light mode, etc., go back. Okay, and then again we're going through a sort of circular loop there. Okay. However, if you go out of ready, okay, so now we're out of ready. Now you go into this button, and there's a whole load of other stuff. Okay, so ADAS is this collision detection system. So safety start, you see, look, we'll examine your side stand. So that's your side stand sensor. Not sure why you wouldn't have that. Turn assistance, okay, that's to activate the cameras. Again, don't know why, unless you think it's going to distract you. And then reversing assistance. So again, when you go into reverse, it will put on the camera. Okay, so that's that. That's called ADAS. You've got settings for the bike itself. Okay, so panel brightness, auto adaptive brightness, etc., management of maps, so you can go and obviously pick your language. Management of maps, so you say okay, and I want to download, I don't know, the Estonian map. Download, and then it's on your bike. There's a 16 gig hard disk SD card, not replaceable as far as I know, but it should be enough to store a load of things. That's about the operating system, as in the firmware and all that sort of stuff. See, firmware, it's just done a check, it's all okay. Fingerprint settings, so registering fingerprints, etc. Driver recorder, so recording your actual journey, which you can then replay. In actual fact, this is the one that we're actually recording right now, and it does it in 5-minute chunks. Okay, so you can then play those back as you want. Bluetooth music, said play music through the bike speakers. A phone call, obviously, that's got your phone information, including all your contacts. Information about the bike itself, so range information, battery information, functional status, as in is there anything wrong with it, etc., and control. So one of the interesting things that they've given you is a virtual room. So you can only really do this if it's on the side stand, I think. So if we come back out of here, come back out, press the start button. Okay, you might like that, you might not, but it's there. Okay, so yeah, interesting. It takes you a bit of time to get used to all of this, actually. Oh, and a light carpet is lights underneath. Okay, so in case you want to change that. All right, so there we go. Turned off my virtual room. All right, so that's sort of in a nutshell what this bike can do. You know, and as you can see, no other bike that I know does it. What's interesting, actually, is if you compare, even though this bike is only, it came out in 2020, I think, they have filed over 200 patents for this bike. I think it was 211 is what I saw. NIU, with all of the clever stuff that they do, 111. So, you know, you're getting on, there's some serious thought going into the technology that goes into this bike. Okay. Anyway, so that's sort of like a snapshot of that. What we do now is the same as we always do, and just see how this is a 50 mile an hour road, this is 50 mile an hour bike. So we'll just see what happens. I'm not expecting the Earth, to be honest, because again, it's 48 volt, and I think that will have an effect. But we'll put it into turbo mode just to see what comes out of it, and we'll put the times up when we get back. Okay, so I'll just wait for clearing the traffic and then we'll go. Let's go. Ooh. So 40. Okay, so it looks like 47 is going to top out at, but that little that little kick that I got from starting off was probably what the turbo mode was all about. All right, so I'll just go down here a little bit and then wrap up. Okay, so Quarter Road. So. Price and grant. So, for whatever reason, Keyway or MotoGP, who are the importers, have not put this bike on the grant. It is a bit of a concern, I suppose, that they didn't feel that it should be on the grant. I have a feeling that they possibly weren't aware of it too much, to be honest, having spoken to them. But I guess you might say, well, they should stand by the warranty, the long warranty that OLEV implies. Having said that, this is our 5th year, and we've never replaced a battery through lack of charge. It's not such an issue, I suppose. It would have been nice, bearing in mind I think the grant's going to end any time now. They keep withdrawing it and reducing it. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't last for much longer anyway. But that does lead on to the price. So if you're comparing it to the two bikes that I'm talking about, the Sunra and the NQiGTS. So this bike is 4299. Okay, with the two batteries, etc., all this clever stuff, 4299. The NIU is 3799, so 38. You have to remember, of course, that you get no storage with an NIU, so unless you're prepared for a rucksack, you're going to have to add on, you know, a couple of £100 for a rack and a top box. Bearing in mind an NIU top box on its own is £148, so you're looking at almost at least £200 just to add on a NIU top box and a rack to an NIU bike. So that puts it to 4,000. So you're then £300 different. Okay, more powerful, but probably less range, but cleverer tech. So that's that. Then you are comparing it to the Robo. So the Robo does look good value if you look at the price and the performance, I suppose. As I said, same battery capacity, but in a different configuration, so 72 times 40 rather than this 48 volt based bike. Not as powerful. They have some interesting quotes for range on the Robo site. I think the range is similar, just because of the maths. Okay, so, but it's 3,299. So you're talking about £1,000 difference for a Robo, which is on the grant as well. So let's say it's £300 more than a NQiGTS, but £1,000 more than a Robo. Bearing in mind, you might want to add a second charger onto a Robo to make it comparable, but you're still talking £800. Okay. Similar storage in the Robo, in fact, possibly a little bit better because you can, both batteries are under the floor. It does make it a little bit more fiddly to get those batteries out, and someone did comment about that yesterday, that they found having to lift up the panel and slide the cables backwards and forwards and all that a little bit more fiddly. So, which would I choose if money wasn't an object? I have to say I would choose this one. It's just clever, and it ticks a lot of boxes, being able to charge both batteries off the bike, still getting some storage, all the other clever stuff that it's built in. Yes, it might be nice to have actual navigation on the maps, but I'm not sure how you'd actually program that in, to be honest. How would you put in your origin and destination unless you sat there for 10 minutes taking your gloves off and punching in the address? But anyway, that's just me. So yeah, out of those three, I was thinking that I might be more cramped, which would lead me towards the NQiGTS, but not at all. So that sort of knocked that one off. All right, so hopefully we've covered everything. We will go over this in a bit more detail on the static review that we're going to do shortly. But for now, hopefully you found that useful. If you would like to follow us on our YouTube channel, then please feel free to subscribe. Obviously, this is available for test riding and buying through us in southwest London. And if you need to contact us, please feel free to do so on the myriad of ways that we are contactable these days. And thanks very much.